any further ado, let's get started. A lot of you wanted to know what Saikai is all about, and I am really excited to tell you all about it right now. Saikai is the largest international honor society in the world and was founded in 1929. The purpose is to encourage, stimulate, maintain excellence in scholarship, and advance the science of psychology. Just some of the member benefits is the fact that you have the international recognition for academic excellence in psychology, over $400,000 scholarships available in terms of grants, awards, and scholarships. You have access to the Career Center to review thousands of relevant jobs. There's also the opportunity to become a published author through the peer-reviewed publications, as well as the fact that you can wear Saikai's regalia on the graduation day, as well as many more things that we will be discussing throughout the event. How do you apply for Saikai then? So all applicants must have second year standing. You must also have psychology declared as either your major or minor at the time you apply for membership. The GPA cutoffs are 78.6% or higher for second years, 78.3% or higher for third years, and 80.9% or higher for fourth years. Transfer students must meet GPA and course requirements and must have also taken 12 credits of psych coursework at UBC. We welcome new members twice a year in the spring, fall, and summer session. So please keep an eye out for the announcement through our emails, website, and social media channels. A little bit now about the awards that are specifically offered by the UBC chapter of Saikai that you all have access to if you're a member. The one first being the Swiffield Scholar Award. This award recognizes the most outstanding student combining excellence in academics, research, and service as leadership. This is UBC Saikai's most prestigious award. Coming to the Goldsmith-Williams Award for Outstanding Student Leadership. This is a service/leadership-based award designed to recognize an outstanding student leader in our department and our community. The Distinguished Undergraduate Research Award, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's a research award based to recognize an outstanding student researcher in our department. And then you have the Undergraduate Travel Award, which is designed to financially support undergraduate research presentations at national or international conferences. These awards are only available to Saikai members, so it's not as competitive in the rest of the awards. So we highly encourage everyone to apply. Moving on to find the nitty-gritty of the event, I would now like to introduce our speakers for the evening. We have Brandon with her here today, who is a first year's master's student studying psychology with a focus in cognitive science at UBC. He's received the Trek Excellence Scholarship 3 times, the Westbrook Scholar Award, as well as the HSBC Emerging Leader Scholarship and the Swiffield Scholar Award, which is the Saikai Award, as mentioned. A fun fact about him is that he doesn't know how to ride a bike, but he's welcome to connect with all of you on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to him after this. Moving on to our next speaker for the evening, Aaron Zhao. Aaron Zhao is currently pursuing a joint MBA/MPP degree. He's received 5 awards from Saikai, 3 travel grants to fund 5 conferences, as well as a designation of the top undergraduate in the world as a Saikai scholar in 2019. Just one of the perks associated with being a part of Saikai. He's also the president of the Best Club at UBC. A fun fact about him is that he also doesn't know how to ride a bike, but is definitely welcome to connect with all of you on LinkedIn after this. Thank you to our amazing speakers for taking our time this evening. So without further ado, let's get started.
Thank you, Ria. Let's open the floor to our first guest speaker, master's student Brandon Forys. First of all, congratulations on winning the Westbrook Scholar Award, HSBC's Emerging Leadership Scholarship, and the Swiffield Scholar Award from UBC Saikai. Could you briefly explain what each of these awards are and how you came to know about them?
All right, thank you so much, Adia. So let's go for each of these awards. So the Westbrook Scholar Award, it's one of the most prestigious awards that you can get as an undergraduate student at UBC. The application process is a multi-stage process. If you've passed the grade cutoff, which I think is something like 75 or 80% in like your top 30 credits, you will likely receive around now probably an email saying that you're eligible to apply for this award. and a set of other awards known as the Premier Undergraduate Scholarships. So after that, you'll have to fill out a variety of information, including a statement of activities, so kind of like a formalized resume, kind of discussion of kind of where you've been and where you're going in terms of kind of your interest person. And that's kind of just as the first stage. As a second stage, you have to seek a couple of references. So you could ask your professors for that. And then at the final stage, they will actually have an interview with you. The interviewer is actually pretty nice, and it's a pretty fun and engaging experience. But just be warned, it is a multi-stage process. Make sure you dedicate a lot of time to apply for these awards. And if you are eligible to win the Westbrook Scholar Award, you're automatically considered for the other awards, a variety of other ones. Many of them require athletics, but one of them is, for example, the HSBC Emerging Leader Scholarship. So these are just a variety of awards, the most prestigious ones that you can win as an undergraduate student, and I highly recommend that you can apply for them. And also at a wonderful reception that they have, at least when I went, you get to meet Santa Ona, the president of UBC, and you're treated to a nice meal of hors d'oeuvres and pictures. So those are the first two awards. As for this is the highest award that is available from UBC Saikai. So just to be clear, this is from our own chapter here at UBC, funded by the support that the department generously gives us, and partially by the fees that you pay as a member of Saikai. So this award is, you can basically apply for it by submitting, I believe, a resume, and also a couple of references and a brief statement. And then the Saikai exec team, so that's Shiren, Abi, and the other wonderful members of the team will be reviewing that. And in around April or May, those will be awarded. And that's a wonderful award to apply for. If you're interested in becoming a member of Saikai, or if you're already a member of Saikai, definitely go for it. It is the most prestigious psychology-related award you can get at UBC. And I found out about these awards just mostly through email, through friends, and through Saikai communications in the case of the Sudfeld Award. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I didn't know that. How much time did you spend on the application?
For sure. So for the Westbrook Scholar and HSBC Emerging Leader Scholarship, as I explained earlier, this process kind of comes in stages. So I'd say I probably spent about maybe like 15, 20 hours total, but it was spread out across like 4 or 5 months because the initial, I guess, offer to apply for the scholarship of Westbrook Scholar HSBC comes in about like October, November, sometime in the fall. And then the interview is usually in January. So it's a multi-month process that's kind of spread out. And for the Sudfeld Scholar Award, those are usually happening towards more the spring, and probably I spent like maybe 5 hours total working on that. And I definitely recommend starting early, of course.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. These awards are all very competitive. What was something that made you a unique applicant? In your opinion, what is something a student can do to distinguish themselves?
So exactly, it is a really, really competitive award. I've known many very established students, even honors students, who've applied for these awards and who like were arguably even more qualified than I was and who were not able to get to them. So of course, there's like an element of chance depending on who applies per year. But one thing that I'd say made me a unique applicant is I was willing to commit myself and kind of stay determined on the tracks of a lot of different pursuits, and also to take a lot of personal initiative. So one of the things that I think stood out for me is that I'm the co-founder of the Turing Club, which is an AI club here at UBC that seeks to teach people how to use AI even if they don't have specific computational expertise. And so I had some experience in kind of initiative and leadership in terms of starting and helping to form that club. I also have a fair experience that I've gathered over the years, starting as early as I could. So basically, my suggestion for the Westbrook Scholar would be to really dedicate yourself to whatever you're passionate about. It may be a little bit cliche to say, but if you have a club that you're really interested in becoming an executive of, or if there's even a club idea you have an idea for forming, those are great ways to get involved in significant ways. Since, of course, we're talking to a Saikai group here, people who are interested in psychology or neuroscience, get involved in your labs, be known by your professors. That will also help you get better references. References are super important in this process. And the same pretty much applies for the Sudfeld Scholar Award, except that there focus a little bit more on the research, as well as on your club work. So if you are somebody who is passionate about taking the initiative, taking leadership, not just being somebody who does what they're told, but actually wants to push the club forward in new and interesting ways, then I strongly recommend you apply for these awards, and I think you'll have a good chance of succeeding with them. So that's what you can do to distinguish yourselves. Take initiative. Don't be afraid to kind of push yourself a little bit and try something new, and take leadership.
Yeah, thank you. That's really insightful. What skills and experiences would you recommend that we gain before applying for scholarships and awards? And I know you touched on this a little bit more. I was wondering if you wanted to expand a little more.
For sure. So again, for the Westbrook Scholar and the HSBC Emerging Leader Scholarship that can come out of it, definitely leadership is one of the things that they're looking for. I mean, it's literally the title of one of those awards after all. So if you're somebody who's maybe not very comfortable in kind of taking the lead in a group discussion, or say you're not that confident about public speaking or writing or kind of sharing your thoughts, that's something to maybe try and focus on. Of course, it can be a little bit difficult. It certainly was difficult for me to get to this point, but it's good to just not just do it because you feel like it's a good thing, but actually to spend quite a bit of time trying to improve yourself in that domain, make yourself known, and above all, develop skills that will help you be of service to the community. So that's another big aspect that I haven't really touched on yet. And these awards, they care not so much about not only how it benefits you as a person, but also how it's benefited the lives of others. So, for example, if you're a leader in a club, you are helping students have an enriching academic or creative experience. For the Sudfeld Scholar Award, your research maybe could have some real life societal implications in the longer term, and that combined with your leadership in those clubs makes you somebody who has a positive impact on the community on your campus, which is something they care about a lot for both kinds of awards. So, above all, I would say kind of like public speaking and leadership skills are most important to develop. And second of all, if you have something that you're really passionate about, see how you can turn it into passionate about computer programming. Try and join a research lab that focuses on programming. That's what I did, and I was able to get involved in a lot of different projects and labs that way, which helped me for these applications as well. So I mean, it really depends on what your strengths are, what your interests are, but whatever you do, try and dedicate yourself to it. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Brandon. How did you get involved in research, both on and off campus?
For sure. So my first research experience here at UBC was actually through a program that I cannot recommend enough. It's the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Research Experience Program, or as some of you may know it as URO-REX. So it's basically a program in which you are paired with usually a master's or doctoral student in a scientific field. They have many of them in neuroscience labs, and you get to work on a project with them. Usually it's like a basic literature review project, but the key is you get to present a poster at the end of the year at the Multidisciplinary Undergraduate Research Conference. So it's a really amazing way to get a foothold into the world of research. And often, as was the case for me and Tim Murphy's lab in psychiatry, you're actually offered a position in the lab right after that role. So from that position in the lab, which you might get afterwards, you may have a jumping point from which you can start to do more sophisticated and advanced research. So that's how I got involved. And beyond that, so I've applied for various labs, succeeded a few times, failed many times. But if you're really passionate, interested in research, and you've already gotten a little bit of research experience for these kinds of methods, I would suggest if, for example, you're like in your second year, for example, consider something like the honors program. The honors program, as Aaron and I can both attest, it's a really fulfilling and amazing experience for both psychology and behavioral neuroscience students, offering you the opportunity to work on a very detailed and in-depth research project, professor, or with a grad student. And if you're not that interested in honors, you feel like you don't want to dedicate yourself that much to research, you're not sure about going to grad school, that's totally okay too. You can also try out directed studies, which is kind of like a smaller focused research project that you can then turn into a poster or even a publication and still involves hands-on work in respective labs. And that's for my research on campus, where primarily my work has been. For off-campus, I would say people like probably Aaron could speak more to that, but just kind of make yourself known out there, develop your LinkedIn profile, apply to places you find interesting, whether it's in this city or elsewhere, and opportunities can be abounding everywhere you look, actually. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a second year student, so that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
How did you manage your time and stay motivated amongst all these things?
This is probably the number one question that I get asked by people who know me. How on earth do I manage my time? Because I'm somebody who's known to work quite a bit. So, in general, I guess like before in pre-pandemic times, I definitely tried to kind of take walks around campus. Say in the afternoons, I was kind of like I would try and finish my work around 6 or 7 o'clock, and then maybe take a little bit of a walk around campus and enjoy nature before taking the bus back home. And just kind of, as Aaron can also attest, nature is actually scientifically proven to improve your cognitive abilities. If you're enjoying nature and you're walking around and you see all these wonderful trees, it will actually help you refresh your mind and focus more, and that can be a good way to relax. Due to the pandemic, of course, things have gotten shaken up in so many ways. We all experience Zoom fatigue. We're on classes or meetings for like half of the day every day, and so my routine has now been to basically try and take some exercise time for exercise, about 15-20 minutes every day for exercise. Take a few hours walk. Try not to do any work when possible after 8 o'clock at night, after which time I usually just read or play video games or chat with friends. So the main thing to take away is kind of keep yourself with strict like deadlines. Like say kind of you have a cutoff time after which you're not going to do work. You're just going to kind of have some time and space for yourself, for your friends, for your social life, which can be increasingly difficult to do now that our workplace is often our bedroom or our little home office or our computer, same computer where we might be playing games or hanging out with friends. So, yeah, just set those strict deadlines for yourself and keep to them whenever possible. And I think that's really helped me successfully manage my mental health and keep up my motivation as well. So I'm not just kind of getting dragged along and getting really tired with all this work late into the night. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That brings me to the end of my questions for you. You gave some invaluable advice. Thank you so much. Now to Aaron Zhao, who recently finished his internship at a Science and Technology Parks Corporation and is currently looking to pursue a joint MBA MPP degree. You've been awarded with 3 travel grants and to fund 5 conferences, 5 awards from Sci-Chi, and was nominated as the Sci-Chi Scholar in 2019. Congratulations, Aaron. Similar to Brandon, could you please briefly tell us what awards you won and walk us through the general application process?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron. So the 3 travel grants that I got were the Sci-Chi Unrestricted Travel Grants, the Undergraduate Research Opportunity, the URO, NCRC Travel Grant, and the Arts Undergraduate Society Travel Grant. I'm just going to put the Sci-Chi one and the AUS link, both of them in the chat box if anyone's interested. If you are applying to conferences, there are also, Adia, you're also muted. If there are applying to conferences, there's 2 others that I would recommend, which is the Quinn Undergraduate Travel Grants and whatever conference you're going to, a conference-specific travel grant. So most of them do have travel grants for undergraduates, but the timeline is a little bit more large, I guess. You have to apply about a year in advance. With other awards, I won the Sci-Chi Undergraduate Scholar Award, and then I actually won 3 chapter awards. So I kind of snuck that in there. That includes the Model Chapter Award, the nomination for the Kate Wilson Leadership Award, and the Ruth Hubbard Cousin Chapters Award.
That's really cool. How much time did you spend on the application process?
Yeah, so controversial opinion, I would say if there's something that's really, really big. So for example, Brandon's HSBC Emerging Leaders Award, that's a really big one, right? I would say 1 year. And 1 year seems like a really long time. So for example, the Sci-Chi Undergraduate Scholarship, I saw the 2018 applicants get through, and I said, wow, it'd be really cool if I got to do that too. So then I instantly went on their website. I said, hey, what are the application components and how can I prepare them? And for me, sometimes I think with everyone, motivation wanes, right? Especially during pandemic times, you're not always motivated every single day to get up and do work. So starting early gives you a little bit of a buffer. It says, hey, I can start this, leave it, and then come back to it later. And so that's what I typically do with a lot of my applications. I start a folder on my desktop. I say, do this by this date. And every so often, when I have nothing to do, I go back to it. I write it a little bit. I edit it a little bit. And eventually I get to it. Most of the time, though, I do think about 2 or 3 months in advance is a good timeline, though.
Okay, that's really helpful. When we look at awards, the common preconceived notion is that there's no point applying. It's probably too competitive, or one is not qualified enough. What was something that made you a unique applicant, and how do you think students can distinguish themselves?
Yeah, this is a really, really good question. And I think this is, if there's one thing that you should take away from this session, is that you should be able to sell yourself. And there's two ways to do that. One is you can do amazing things, right? You can be the project manager of 10 labs, you can publish research in articles and journals and reviews, or you can be like, have 10 leadership positions. But that's really hard for a lot of people to do, just statistically. So the other way to do it, and this is a skill you build, is to be able to twist your narrative. And this is something I'm always kind of passionate about. You don't have to do good things. You just have to be able to say it in amazing ways. And so are you going to be the person who's introducing themselves as, hey, I'm a third-year psychology student. I'm interested in clinical psychology? Because that's 80% of the psychology population. Or are you going to say, hey, I am a third-year prospective master's student looking into a specific field of clinical psychology. I've already taken the initiative to volunteer my efforts with so-and-so professor at so-and-so lab, and I've wanted to get involved, and I've put in the time to research into the specific schools I want to, and these are the specific reasons. That shows academic maturity or professional maturity that 80% of the psychology population won't go to do. So when you are trying to sell yourself, don't think, hey, I don't have all these experiences that other people do. Think about, what experiences do I have that I can twist and make sound even better? How can I sell myself as not just third-year psychology, second-year psychology student, but as something that not everyone is?
That's really insightful, Aaron. Thank you so much. So in order to win all these awards, you must have been involved in a lot of different activities on campus. Can you tell us a little bit about how you stayed involved with the community?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to preface by saying kind of event planning and getting involved was something I was really passionate about. I really liked it. And so there's a lot of stuff that I did, but let me just go through it first. I guess I had 5 presidential positions over 12 campus clubs. So I was involved in 12 UBC clubs, and I've been a presidential position in 5 of them. That includes being the president of the largest charity, World Vision UBC, the vice president of a nonprofit, Students for Partners in Health Canada, the vice president of the undergraduate journal of psychology, and the vice president and president of Psychi. I've also been a statistics tutor for Psych 218, note taker, and like with Brandon, I was in the honors program, which means that I had 3 research positions in clinical, social, and cognitive labs.
Wow, that's a lot. Congratulations. Thank you, Aaron. Back to travel grants. Can you walk us through the application process for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most travel grants are fairly similar. Most of the time you'll experience having to write some length of kind of a description of why you need that travel grant from an equity standpoint. Then you'll have to go through kind of what your whatever you're presenting, what it's about, a quick description about that. And most of the time I find that it's pretty helpful to just check it with your graduate student. If you're not in a lab yet, then I'd say the advice I always give is that if you're not in a lab yet and you aren't sure if you want to do research or not, then go to the UBC Department of Psychology website, go through all of the labs, click all the ones that you like, and then send them all an email, because they're always looking for volunteer RAs. So it's always worth a shot. If you are already in a lab, then look for conference opportunities. A lot of the time for things like directed studies, so you'll have it's kind of embedded in your program, but otherwise you kind of have to take the initiative to go out and do it. So the easiest and most successful ones at UBC are the Psychology Undergraduate Research Conference, PERC, run by the PSA, the Psychology Student Association, and the Multidisciplinary Undergraduate Research Conference, which Brendan talked about a little bit earlier. For both of those, You probably won't need travel grants or anything, but just to talk about a little bit about my experience, this year I did those two. I also got invited to present at Harvard, Stanford, and the largest social psychology conference, SPSP. So definitely reach out to me if you're interested in social psychology. I have a little bit of insight in that. In terms of the travel grants itself, you'll have to be a little bit careful about when you apply. So for big conferences, the social psychology conference, the clinical psychology conference, the neuroscience conference, when you apply for travel grants is typically just a little bit after you get accepted. And that can be almost like 8 months before. So as a last minute person, I didn't get to do something like that. But a lot of the UBC grants, so the URO has some, the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Club at UBC, the AUS has one, and then the Quinn. Those timelines are a little bit more flexible, and I really recommend, if you are a SciCi member, the SciCi Unrestricted Travel Grant is really accessible. Pretty much year round, you can apply to it and get a lot of your money reimbursed.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really interesting and to know. So you've received a multitude of awards. So based on your award, whether it's a travel grant or research community based award, how does your strategy change?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess the boring answer is that it doesn't change. The more interesting answer is that the reason it doesn't change is because the thing that you're trying to do the most is to differentiate yourself. And that strategy stays constant throughout. Just as Brandon was talking about earlier with the HSBC award, there were many qualified candidates for that position. Do you really think that okay, let's take me as an example. I got the SciCi undergraduate scholarship. That's 8 out of, almost 500,000 undergraduates in the world, right? I don't think I'm in the top 8 undergraduates in the world, very honestly. I was like a straight B high school student. I don't have any fancy internships. I'm kind of lazy sometimes, and that happens, right? But I think one thing I'm really good at is selling myself, being able to twist things that are otherwise ordinary to sound extraordinary. And that unlocks further positions down the path, unlocks further experiences down the path. And so one thing that I think stays constant throughout all of your applications, your travel grants, your scholarships, your awards, is that you need to show the adjudicators, the award adjudicators, why you are different, how you are different from everyone else. The psychology department at UBC is the largest department at UBC. We have 2,000 students. So what differentiates you from the other 2,000 students? It can't just be that you're a second year psychology student, because there are 600 other psychology students in second year. So find something that would differentiate you, whether that's getting involved in a research lab or a specific initiative, whether that's getting involved in kind of the industry or practicum with leadership, or whether that is finding a niche for yourself. So in my second year, I went to do coffee chats with professors pretty much like every month, because I wanted to know, hey, what's my career path? And I settled on, I want to be an in-house industrial organizational psychologist focused on social connections in the workplace. That's a very specific goal. And when you say that in an application, people remember that. But when you say, hey, I'm a second year psychology student, that's one of 100 applications. So find something that you can define yourself on, even if that's just temporary.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That's really helpful advice. And I think everyone will agree. To you, Ria.
Thank you, Adyas. Now we have a few questions for both of you, and we can just do this in alphabetical order. The first one being, where and how did you find out about the various scholarships and award opportunities? What would you say is the best resource?
Alphabetical order, so I'm always going first. Sorry, Brandon. So the question is, where did I find all these opportunities? And then what's the second part again?
What would you say is the best resource to find out about these?
Yeah, I guess for me, where I found them is, there's no easy answer. They're all over the place and it's a pain to get. There are some paid services that you can go to get someone to do it for you. But honestly, I feel like if you want it, you just have to put in the work for it. And for me, that meant, hey, I was doing work. I felt like I wanted to procrastinate. And instead of procrastinating by watching YouTube videos or going on my phone, I was procrastinating by looking for scholarships. So even when you're procrastinating, look for something that can be productive And then when you find you want to procrastinate that, go back to work or actually procrastinate. It's up to you. But in terms of what's the best way to do it, I think something that's invaluable is your network. So Brandon and I, for example, shared a lot of awards and stuff like that. And I feel like a few of the executives in Sakai last year, I talked with one of them, and they were the ones who got me aware of the Harvard conference. And I got this amazing, all expense paid, like trip that I learned a lot about, right, with a multidisciplinary community. And that's not possible without word of mouth. So I think one thing that people are scared of a lot is to ask your friends or ask your colleagues or ask your acquaintances, do you know of any opportunities? And you'll be surprised how, if you take the courage and the confidence to do a quick, polite ask, how many dividends it can pay down the line. Because you can imagine that you can ask 10 people and they will, that kind of broadens your scope of what opportunities there are by 10 times. You can only be exposed to so much and learn so much yourself. So rely on the people around you.
Yeah, thank you. And I would definitely agree with basically everything that Aaron said. I guess just to add on to that, don't be afraid to ask people in your lab as well, if you're in a lab or kind of just in your class, in your space, among your friend group. One of the most invaluable sources of scholarship and award information for me has actually been my first honor supervisor, Dr. Kieran Soma. So as my supervisor, and even to this day, after I've graduated, he still sends me a variety of scholarships and awards. Now, like kind of applications that you can look up, that I could look up. Now, this is of course not going to be the case for everybody. Not all are as willing to kind of send this kind of information around. So you really do have to do some digging yourself. In addition, UBC has some great resources. If you look up just scholarships at UBC, that's where I found the information about the premier undergraduate scholarships, including the Westbrook and the HSBC scholarships. Of course, the Psych-High UBC website is where I learned all about the Psych-High scholarships. So there are a couple of repositories where you can hit like a lot of scholarships at once. But again, my best advice, and something that I wish I'd honestly done more as an undergraduate, is reach out to your network, because you can discover these amazing opportunities that you would not have explored before. It's really hard to say that there's one best resource, other than maybe, I guess, just your network, as Aaron said. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I completely agree with your points. Like word of mouth, having good network is very important. Just, I guess, letting your profs know about what your interests are so they can also let you know about some of the opportunities available. I've also benefited from these in the past, so totally vouch for that. The second question is, what is something that you wish you knew before applying to these scholarships and awards?
I think one of the things that I wish I knew is that you don't have to always push yourself and try so hard to do it. I think I want to take a moment, I know, to talk about mental well-being and mental health. I think it's really important that especially in like the Department of Psychology, where everything is scaled, you always feel the pressure to do better than others. And I think sometimes you don't always have to do that through awards and to push yourself consistently. Say the pandemic, for example, it's good enough that you're surviving through the pandemic. You don't always have to pick up new skills. It's great if you can, but take care of yourself before you take care of anything else, because in the long term, when you take care of yourself, that's when you can grow the most. When you don't take care of yourself, you'll grow for a little bit and then you'll stagnate, fall, procrastinate, so on, so on. I've been there, right? But in terms of like, sorry, what was the question again?
What do you wish you knew before applying to these scholarships?
Right. I guess for me, one of the bigger things was that I wish I knew about more scholarships, and I wish I had a better way of finding them. So I think a lot of you who have looked for scholarships may go through the same sentiment, that you'll go on Google, you'll say UBC scholarships for undergraduates, and then you'll find like 100 links, you'll control, and then you'll click 10 of them, and then they'll be on your desktop for like a week. And I think for me, I tried to have an Excel sheet. I tried going, what are the major organizations? Google, Microsoft, Scotiabank, RBC, and then I just had a lot to handle at once. And congruent with school, that's a lot of stuff to go through. So I'd say focus on a few that you're eligible for and that you're competitive for. And then kind of really just hone in on those, because it's much better to have a quality application than multiple bad applications. But everything is practice. So if you have the time, do those bad applications too.
Again, I would totally agree with what Aaron said. That's something I definitely wish I'd known as well. And taking care of your mental health, that's really the foremost point of importance. Should come above any kind of scholarship award applications, especially ones that maybe you don't necessarily 100% need for to kind of survive in your current situation. As for what I wish I'd known, I'd say I wish I'd had maybe better skills of communicating and selling my interests. Of course, Aaron talks a lot about kind of how a big part of the process is standing out, communicating that you are somebody who's driven and unique, who has these unique things you can bring to the table. And while for me, I've always been able to, I guess, stay honest to myself and stay true to myself when making these scholarships and applications, which is a really important part. They don't want to see a fake version of yourself, because if there's a follow up interview or anything like that, it'll just all fall apart right away, what you wrote in the essay. But being an effective communicator, selling yourself appropriately is super, super important. Sometimes it can just be a really difficult strategy. Like sometimes you maybe think, hey, I really haven't done so much. You look at the list of people who won the award in the past and you say, you can't help but compare. You say, like, this person has had 20 different internships and 5 publications. What do I have to offer? How can I possibly compete? It can be discouraging. But as Aaron said, and the point is that what I wish I'd known is how to communicate and sell myself in a way that I could stand with the very best of the best, just kind of in terms of what I would appear to be able to bring to the table, even if I didn't have all of those tangible, specific experiences that others had.
Totally. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing those insights. Definitely being able to craft a good story is a skill by itself, which I think sets you apart from everyone else that applies. So, totally agree with that. Coming to the next question, keeping in mind the fact that we have the pandemic going on, to our guests tonight, do you have any advice on, particularly right now, what can you do to get the best out of your psychology degree, or just to be able to apply your psych degree in general?
Yeah, so I'll take it first. Sorry, Brandon. Alphabetical order. But I think in terms of your psychology degree, I would say the research is a big component. So right now, I'd say there are kind of maybe 3 levels, right? There's the I've never gotten into research before. I want to try it out. I don't know if it's for me. That's when you become a volunteer RA, right? So that's when you go to the UBC Department of Psychology website, you look up all the labs, you say, ooh, this lab's done something on something I'm pretty interested in. I would like to get involved. You go to their website, you search up. So for me, I'm interested in happiness. I want to make people happy for a living. So I searched up UBC Department of Psychology. I found the Happy Lab. I went to their contact us, and then I filled out their little form. I sent an email to the professor and I said, hey, I was really interested in what I saw on the website. I read a few of the publications and the news articles, and I wanted to see if you had 10 or 15 minutes to have a chat with me. I talked with her, and then I followed up with the lab manager saying, hey, I just had a conversation with Dr. Dunn, and I'd really like to get involved with the lab. She endorsed this. I was wondering, what the details would be like. So that's the first way. Often now, things will be remote because a lot of the UBC department, a lot of the labs are closed, but the kind of structure does not change. If you're already a research assistant or have some experience with, data analysis and stuff like that, I'd recommend maybe looking into not continuing your research, but also there's an opportunity right now with a big wave of open science, right? So if you go to the open science framework, or if you look up other open data repositories, you'll find a lot of kind of past studies that will share their data that you can manipulate and that you can kind of hop onto R or hop onto SPSP or whatever SPSS, there you go, 218, or whatever data analyzing software you have, hop onto there and kind of play with it, and you might find something cool. And then the third thing I'd say is, as a psychology student, data and that kind of quantitative aspect is important. So I think one thing that you could do is just start a personal project. Say, hey, I want to, I'm interested in happiness. Let's find out what research there is. Let's do a literature review, because in the long run, you'll probably be able to just translate that into a directed studies or into a thesis if you need one. And then the other part is, I think, how do you get involved during something like a pandemic? You're not on campus, everything is remote. you're scared to go out. Well, one way is through the amazing people at Saikai, but a second way is just broadly to attend events. And I think a lot of things are harder to do now that it's a pandemic, but you can still do it. And I think the big thing is just to follow up on things. So go to the event, but so say this event, you've attended the event and 80% of the people who attend the event will just attend the event and then not retain the information. They'll move on with their days, their weeks, their months, and then they'll forget everything that they've gone from this event, right? And then they won't have any context too. So feel free to reach out to either the speakers, the people at Saikai, or just the people in the chat here. And then also take notes and try to follow up on them. Set yourself goals, then set deadlines for them.
Sure. Totally agree. Once again, with everything that Aaron has said, just to add on to that, one challenge that you may be facing currently during the pandemic is you may be finding that labs are less willing than usual to take on RAs. So normally labs are pretty well opening and welcome with open arms students, but nowadays the main challenge to recognize, speaking as somebody who's a grad student in the lab who has recruited a couple of RAs, is there's not as much for RAs to do when the lab is all online. Like if you're running online studies, many grad students will just want to kind of program their own study, then kind of just run it out into the world. You can get 100 participants and never have to have an RA welcome a single participant. So, but that being said, just be prepared, I guess, to be creative. You may end up doing something that you might not have expected you to do. Instead of, for example, welcoming participants into the lab and getting them set up on a study, now that the study's online, you might be maybe more involved with data analysis. So kind of trying to speak and reach out to that. Be clear if you're in an interview with, or if you even if you have an email, you could ask, how can I get involved? I recognize it's a pandemic situation. I recognize your studies are online. How can I help? How can I get involved? And actually, now more than ever, having competencies and interest in data and working with data is really important, because while the studies may be online and the resources are less for that, the data never ends, literally. And so if you have skills or interest in using our SPSS, as Aaron said, if you're just finished 218 and you like to apply your stats skills or anything beyond that, I can tell you firsthand experience that labs are always looking for people who have data analysis interests or experience, because there's always more data than the students can handle. And if you have some competencies and interest in analyzing data, then that's actually a way for you to end up on a lot of publications and papers. So my suggestion is definitely take this time that you might have, look into SPSS or R, and kind of just have some practice of data analysis label to almost any lab, even in the pandemic or out of the pandemic. So that's one way to really get a lot of out of your psychology degree, is just getting involved in research labs in any way that you really can. And then for different communities relating to psychology, well, of course, as Saikai, we here are a community. The opportunity for you to continue to be involved in our events. The Psychology Students Association also runs a lot of more socially focused events. So they're a great community as well. The Undergraduate Journal of Psychology, Aaron, of course, has a lot of experience with that. A really great forum for students to share their research as undergraduate students. So if you look, there are many different groups that are ready to welcome you with open arms in the psychology department, and many labs that are ready to welcome students, as long as you keep an open mind to the slightly adjusted and different kinds of research and tasks that you may be involved in given the pandemic.
And I just want to cut in before the next question is asked, just to follow up on that. Don't just look at your degree and say, I'm a psychology student, I have to get involved in psychology clubs. More than ever now, having a breadth of experience is really, really valuable. Unless you are sure you're going into academia, you're like, hey, I want to publish papers for my life, for the rest of my life, and I want to do academia, then maybe that's the case that it's better to be involved in just psychology. But I think for 80-90% of people who aren't going to pursue academia, and that's a fair statistic, I think, is that eventually you'll probably be doing something else that's not psychology. And when that happens, other skills will be extremely valuable. So in my last year, I said, hey, I want to try something new. I hopped over to the Sauder Business School and I said, I became the director of operations for a business club. We did a bunch of networking events. I met a lot of people at top 4 accounting firms. It was a good time. So that's really, really important. Second is that, you you can hone your SPSS and R skills, but by no means do you have to be an expert to help with the lab. You can also learn on the job, right? I think a common misconception that people have is, man, there's 2,000 people in the psychology department. There's probably someone that's, a lot better than me in our SPSS, and therefore I cannot volunteer my skills until they are perfect. I am an expert at it. But that is really not the case, because 99% of people won't spend more than 2 or 3 days actually honing their skills, right? They'll say, hey, I want to, try to increase my data analysis skills. They will get on it for 1 or 2 days, and then they won't do it anymore, right? The most important thing is not to burn yourself out. It's to set a consistent schedule where you spend not 8-hour binge sessions drinking Tim Hortons while it's midnight. It's taking 1 hour every day, 30 minutes every day, even 5 minutes every day. As long as you do it consistently, you'll be growing consistently. So I think one of the big things is that you don't have to be an expert to volunteer your efforts. You can spend a little bit of time learning certain things, and that will give you the power to be in your email, be like, hey, I've been getting some experience in learning about XYZ in R, and I was wondering if I could volunteer my analysis skills in your lab. And then the last thing is I just wanted to talk about the transferability. So Brandon was talking about how, even now when you go to do, when you volunteer your efforts or you get a job and stuff like that, it might be really different from what you're expecting. And I think that's a really good thing. In my first research assistant role as a volunteer research assistant, I was in the parenting lab, which doesn't exist anymore. And my job was to stress moms out. I literally made them do math, and then I said mean things to them ethically. And that was a really weird experience for me, but it allowed me to say, hey, I worked at a clinical lab. It allowed me to understand more about different paradigms that are used, and it allowed me to do a lot of outreach. So I think a lot of things that aren't like the idealistic job that you would want are still helpful for you to take a step towards it.
Definitely. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing such detailed insights with us. Coming to the last question that I have for both of you, because you've covered, touched on this a bit before in your answers. I just want you guys to briefly tell me a little bit about how your experience as a psychology student has shaped your current career plans. And whoever can take it if they want. I don't want to put you on the spot again. I'm in alphabetical order, so whoever wants to go first.
All yours, Brandon.
Okay. Well, so as for me, I guess as I said earlier, I'm currently a grad student here at UBC, studying cognitive science, which is something that I started becoming interested in, I'd say, a couple of years ago, starting working with Kieran Soma's lab on the animal side and Tim Murphy's lab on the neuroscience side. And then kind of those interests together in Dr. Rebecca Todd's lab, where I'm currently a grad student, as well as with Dr. Alan Kingstone. So my current career interests, it kind of could be diverging down two paths. One is definitely academia. I really enjoy doing research and kind of getting heavily engaged in it, doing all the data analysis, working with participants, trying new advanced techniques. I just love working in that. And I think I really like the job security that it offers once you put in the work and kind of once you get your publications out. So I can imagine myself being a professor after I graduate from my PhD in psychology here at UBC, and after a few years of a postdoc maybe. But then there's also another career path which is increasingly becoming popular in the department, and it's going into industry. And this is coming back again to this data analysis idea. As a psychologist, or as somebody who does psychology or neuroscience research, you're working with all these stats. You're often increasingly building advanced computational models to predict behaviors. You're analyzing images using sophisticated. It turns out these are the exact same skills that companies like Google, Facebook, Apple, and others are looking for people who have the latest edge in analyzing big data, basically, and be able to look at this data and gain valuable inferences from it to help hopefully make the world a better place. And so some people in our department, they're able to go straight into six-figure salary jobs with companies like Google or IBM or Amazon, getting these really amazing experiences. Of course, the job security there is a very different situation, but the pay is potentially higher. And if you prefer kind of industry-focused environment where you're kind of working in a team situation, then that's something that could be for you. And that's something that's always being kept in the back of my mind. And as for my experience as a psychology student, I already spoke a little bit to that, but basically, I would really credit my honors experience as an honors student. It really helped writing two theses, presenting them at a conference. That was a really valuable experience for honing in my research skills and learning what's a feasible research project to be done in a certain amount of time. I also did directed studies, which I found was really good as well. And yeah, overall, it was a fantastic. The experiences that I've had as a psychology student in my undergraduate have really directly contributed to my career plans. But again, as Aaron said, that doesn't mean that you have to go straight into grad school. Your psychology skills can be applied in data science, in kind of analytical jobs, in kind of like social work, in advertising, in such a wide, amazing variety of different fields. So don't feel constrained or boxed in by whatever your professors or your classmates are telling you or expecting. This is just my paths that I'm interested in.
Yeah, I think first you can already imagine Brendan as a lecturer. You can imagine him as a professor, just the way he speaks, right? And second, I think there were two things I really wanted to emphasize. So the question is, how does your education as a psychology student shape the way you are? I think one big idea is that what you do right now doesn't have to define what you do in the future. As Brandon said, there's a bunch of different career opportunities. But more broadly, it's okay to not know what you do right now. Of course, in your awards and scholarships and applications, people don't want to see, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. It's okay if you are like that on the inside, because the way I saw it, right, is that if you are, we call it dawdling, right? Like, I don't really know what I'm doing right now. If you have a time to dawdle, would it be when you're 30 or would it be when you're 20, 21, 22 right now, right? And I think the time is right now to dawdle and to explore a bunch of different career interests. And so I think for me, it took me 3 years of doing research to realize I didn't like research. That didn't mean it was wasted. That didn't mean that, I regret it. It means that there were transferable skills that I can now harness and and leverage the data aspects of to transfer to other jobs. So, for example, I'm looking for full-time opportunities. Well, probably later on, but for the roles that I am looking for and for the graduate programs that I am applying to, I emphasize a lot of the research that I did because there's a lot of big data that I worked with during that, and there was a lot of leadership that I got to do while I was doing those things. Yeah.
Thank you so much to both of you for sharing your insights. This now wraps up the interview portion. The next slide now. Shay, if you could share the screen. We just have a list of few awards that we've compiled to highlight the ones that you all have access to as psychology students. And a good way to know about some of these awards is just to do a quick search to the undergrad, to this link, where basically depending on the kind of faculty you are in, which department you are, you can filter your results. This saves time. You just need to click on this link. And just some everybody know we will be sharing slides after this event is done. So don't worry so much about taking a screenshot right now or noting down the link. Moving on to the next slide. These are just some of the individual ones because some of you want to know for international students, for grad students, as well as some of the deadlines listed for those that are coming in November. I know there was a question about whether the deadlines have passed, but in terms of the international student scholarship, particularly for those who were in arts, the deadline's November 4th. So you have something to watch out for where you can apply all of the skills that we learned today immediately. Moving on now. So this wraps up even the entire interview portion, and I think we would now like to have the floor open for any questions for Aaron and Brandon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ria. I also wanted to note that after the event, everyone who RSVP'd will get a email, which Brandon kindly included a sample writing to his scholarship writing, as well as this presentation. So we did rush through the last few slides, but in this slide, we did try to include helpful links because we did get a lot of inquiry on grants, awards for international students, grad students. So do keep an eye out for that. But right now, while we're lucky enough to have Aaron and Brandon still here with us, please send in your questions through the chat. And we will address them in the order that we receive.
Yeah, and thank you so much to Abby for being answering all of our other questions. And throughout the session, we had a lot of you being so engaged and putting your questions in the chat, and we were able to cover a lot of them already. So, if there's anything else that you would like to know more about, now is the time.
Yeah, we did have a question about how do you guys ask for reference letters from professors? Maybe Aaron can start first, and then Brandon could go.
All right, Brandon. This is a really related question to me right now because I'm asking for letter of references and recommendations for my grad school apps. So I guess the question is how, and I guess the answer is through an email. But I think the question is more about how do you get to the point where you can ask for a letter of reference. I think that's the more important part. And for me, I think UBC is a hard place to do it because you have 50 labs, and in each lab you have to, be a volunteer RA for some time. Then you have to be an RA, a senior RA for some time. Then maybe you can become like a project manager, manage a project or two, work with a grad student, right? And that's a long process. With my lab, the Happy Lab, it took me, I've been working with them for almost 3 years at this point. And only towards the last year and a half did I really get direct exposure to the principal investigator or the doctor or something of the lab, right? And so I think the main thing is that I would, in order to get a reference letter, you really want to have direct exposure to whoever the PI is. If you are applying to stuff like grad schools, because there is more weight behind having a principal investigator write your reference letter. And I think the way to do that is to make sure you're taking initiative and taking those extra steps to stand out and communicate to your grad students or your project managers that you want to take a bigger role in the lab. They cannot read your mind, so let them know that you have the time to and that you have the intention to.
I would totally agree with what Aaron said. One point I will note as well is it sometimes depends on the size of the lab as well. So, for example, a lot of social psychology labs tend to be massive and multi-tiered, where often the professor's not very directly involved in the research. Even the postdocs are kind of up at a higher level, and you're working directly with master's students or grad students or even higher level, more senior undergraduates. This is not always the case. For some of you who might be in behavioral neuroscience, for example, this is my experience with Dr. Kieran Soma, you may be seeing the professor right away. You may be invited to every single lab meeting because you're just working on the lab bench alongside your grad students and alongside your professor. So in those kinds of labs, you are going to be getting a lot more face-to-face time with your professor right away because often it's a smaller lab and there's not so much of an infrastructure set up of people running human participants. So it really depends on the lab situation that you're in. That is not to say that I should select a lab based on the size of the lab, because many of the large labs are often some of the most productive and incredible ones. But it's just worth noting that if you happen to be in a smaller lab, know that a process may not take as long. But once again, you should still follow all the advice that Aaron suggested about being clear about your expectations with your grad students, letting them know what your goals are. And professors, especially those who really care about their students, which thankfully is the vast majority of the ones in this department, they will listen to you and they will help you get what you need to apply to grad schools to get scholarships, etc.
Great, thank you so much, Brandon. I'll direct the next question to Aaron. We had a question from Anna earlier on in the chat asking, how do you manage working in multiple labs at once? Because a lot of students are told that it's unrealistic to do that with a full load, of course.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think I put some things in the chat. So one way is you can do a directed studies. That's like 340 or 440. There's 1 term or 2 term. It's pretty high GPA average as well, if that's, up your alley. But I think that's really good because it lets your lab work be a part of your coursework as opposed to on top of your coursework. I think the realistic answer is that time management is a skill that you build, not something that you get overnight. So something that might not be realistic at year 1 is suddenly realistic in year 2. Just think about the growth. Think about you last year. Would you have been able to do everything that you're doing right now? Maybe, right? But it would have been a lot harder if you hadn't grown that much. So I'd say take up little bits of commitments and responsibilities step by step, and eventually you'll be able to handle more. In my first year, I was just having fun. I was in the fencing club. I was, like trying new things. I was just a coordinator, and I didn't really do too much. In my second year, I did a little bit more. In my third year, I did way too much. And in my fourth year, I said, "Ooh, I need a break," right? So it's a continual process where you adapt and you try to get a little bit more, get a little bit less until you find your stride.
Thank you, Erin. The next question is for Brandon from Stephen. How do you get nominated by your faculty for the Westbrook Scholars Award?
Yeah, so Stephen, I already addressed this question also to you, since you messaged me, but I can also repeat it for everybody. So yes, I should mention that the first stage of the Westbrook Scholar Award is that you have to first be nominated by your faculty. So basically, the first stage of what I was describing, like submitting your statement of interest effectively, kind of your statement of what you're passionate about, a strong resume, those initial references, that all helps you become known amongst your faculty. So there's a certain, I think it's almost like a quota of people from each faculty who end up getting pushed onto the overall award level. Maybe from even medical school and law school, all the different faculties at UBC. So the key for the strategy is stand out among your classmates at first. Stand out in the areas in which you are most proficient. Only at the very last stage, the interview stage, will you be evaluated at the university-wide level. Once there's something like maybe 100 people instead of like 300 or 400 people in your pool, that's when you have to really distinguish yourself on the university-wide level. So it's kind of like a multi-stage process for that purpose. I hope that helped.
Thank you, Brandon. I'll direct the next question to Erin. It's from Sneha. Can you give some insight on if there are any psychology-related jobs available after your undergrad? And if so, what kind of jobs?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's really important to know, because one thing that shows that you have professional maturity is that you know what you want to do after you graduate, and a lot of employers kind of want that. They don't want the student that's like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just shooting my resume everywhere. They want the student that's, I want this role at your company because of this reasons. So it's good to start thinking about that early, and that shows maturity that you're already thinking about it. There are a few resources I would suggest. One is UBC broadly, and specifically the Center for Student Involvement and Careers. You can search UBC CSIC. They typically have an annual report on where art students generally go in terms of their employment and into which industries. I think psychology might have one too, but it's not easily accessible. If you want to know, I would recommend visiting Jennifer Janicki in the undergraduate psychology advising office. It's right next to the main office in the Kenny building. She might be able to give you a little bit insight on that, but generally I would say, what jobs can psychology students do? Everything. You can go into HR, you can go into marketing, you can go into like more clinical or mental health related or health related services. You can really do, the world is your oyster at that point. Is that the expression? I think it is. I hope it is. Otherwise I sound bad. And I think the main thing is that you are maybe you have some advantage and some disadvantage as a psychology student because you have some skills that other people don't. You're going into HR. Are you really going to beat the guy, the HR student who went to solder, right? But you have other things that you can use to your advantage, such as your experience in research, if you took the initiative to do that, your experiences with leadership, if you took the initiative to do that, and your background in human psychology.
That's great. Thank you so much, Erin. We have one question from Hyan, and they're asking that, do you think it'll be better to speak with the principal investigator before we send an application to be a volunteer RA?
I believe he's in my class. He's one of my students. So if you want, I can answer your question. So I think it really depends on the lab. At some labs, depending on what you see on the form, it might be better to reach like on the kind of website. It might be that the grad student in the lab will be the one who's handling all of the applications. For example, in my lab, Professor Rebecca Todd's lab, sometimes it's a mix between the professor and the grad student who kind of gets the emails of interest. Usually people do end up emailing the principal investigator first, and sometimes then it's delegated to a grad student. I'd say it doesn't really hurt to email the principal investigator unless it's a very specific situation in which, say, you have a TA in your class, and the TA is not of the professor who's teaching the class, and you really connected well with that TA, and you want them to introduce you to their grad student. So it really depends on the situation, but in most cases, in my experience, what I've done is I've reached out directly to the principal investigator first, just as an email, and then it's up to them if they want to delegate it to someone else. And if there's a form that they fill out on the website, sometimes it's the professor who monitors it. Sometimes it's it could be a grad student who monitors it. Yeah.
I just also want to add in, when you think about it, it becomes common sense. So the way I think about it is, if a high school student came up to me and said, "Hey, Aaron, I want to talk to you for 5 to 10 minutes," and then the questions they ask me are, when's the deadline to apply to UBC? I would tell them, you could have just Googled this, right? So when you go up to a PI and you ask for a meeting, and you're kind of you're using their time, right? Time is a valuable resource. Don't ask questions that can be easily Googled. Find questions that maybe are a little bit more nuanced or specific to yourself, because those are the two questions that either show that you've thought about it a little bit more, or that will be more useful to you.
Awesome. We have one more question from Caitlin, and this is a general question for the both of you. And they're asking that if you guys have any study or motivational tips for getting good grades in general, because it seems like a lot of the scholarships or awards require really high grades. So do you have any tips regarding that?
I see Aaron is nodding slightly, so I can speak to it first. So I know many of you, and especially those who are taking many psychology courses, are concerned, like, how do you beat the curve? What's with this curve? So the truth is, the curve will only really hurt you if you are kind of like getting mostly kind of like average or lower grades. That's just been basically my experience. Now the question is, of course, how to get the higher grades. It must seem quite difficult, right? The truth is, it does require a lot of work and dedication. Number one thing is keeping up with the readings each week. Don't fall behind on the readings each week, even if they don't seem that important. Many professors like to ask questions that are from the readings in many different classes. So that's one of the number one ways in which you can keep up with the class. Another one is go to your office hours if you do not have an idea of what's going on in the class. As somebody who's now TA'd 3 different courses, 2 as an undergraduate, 1 as a graduate, it is sad and lonely when the professors are sitting there by themselves or the TAs in their office, because what we really want to do as instructors is we want to help you as students. We want to help you succeed, and we'd be more than happy to answer your questions and help you out with anything that we can possibly do. So don't hesitate to reach out to them. They're less busy than you think during their office hours, and that's what they're there for. So and it's also a great way to get to know your professors and TAs kind of outside of the lecture context, and it can be kind of a pathway even to getting research opportunities and getting involved. So yeah, my main is the readings, like talk to your professors, talk to your grad students, and form study groups if you need to as well. One of the main ways I got for my honors involves stats courses, and many of my other courses, especially my 3rd and 4th year, was by forming study groups with my honors friends or the friends in my classes, sharing notes, and even like writing collaborative documents, working together on group projects, working with people whom you know, or people who seem like they know what they're doing, and getting to know them. And that's one of the ways in which you can really, in my opinion, succeed in psychology courses and get higher grades. Yeah.
And just to add on, Brandon is talking to you as the, goody two shoes, master students. I'll talk to you as the university student who just graduated. Take GPA boosters. I think one piece of advice that you can consider is take GPA boosters, and you'll hear that word thrown around a lot. I just want to clear up the misconception that GPA boosters are classes that you just get high grades on, no matter how hard, no matter like even if you don't do anything. And that's really not true. I think a lot of GPA boosters just require you to put in the work to get a little bit of higher grade. 2 resources are UBC Pair, PAIR. You can Google that. That's from UBC, and then you'll be able to search up by section, by course, by year, and by session, I think, with specific professors. What is the average grade that the professor has given to the class every single year for something like the past 7 years? So you can do some research into that when you're planning your courses. Another one, if that drops down, is Slack notes. SLACKNOTES. This is a third-party resource, so don't put too much weight on the actual grades averages that they give. They also have something called IOUT, EYE out, and that'll send you an email every time that a course has been dropped that you want to get into. Just to preface my take GPA boosters advice, I think when you are doing things like grad school applications, they do have access to your transcript. So it's a little bit suspect if you are going into grad school and you say, hey, I'm really, really interested in, psychology and business. And then they look at your transcript and you're taking like, GPA booster 1, GPA booster 2, GPA booster 3. That has nothing to do with psychology and business. So be a little bit more careful about what you're taking if that matters to you. And then I think a broader point is your university degree, and I'd say this for most people, other than really specified degrees like med or law, right? Most university degrees are not about the content that you learn. I don't remember anything that I learned in Sociology 101, Film Studies 101. I don't remember anything I don't remember anything in my fourth year psychology courses anymore, to be honest. It's only been like 5 months-ish. University is learning about how to study and how to learn, and you'll get better at that the more you do it. So Brandon's advice is true. You should do your readings. You should do this. You should do that. But know that it's not going to be like, hey, there's some easy fix where your grades are going to go from here and then they're just going to jump up. It's going to be a gradual process where, remember, you're trying not to burn out. You're trying not to binge 8 hours a day. You're trying to do a consistent 4 to 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours, whatever you need in order to finish what you have. And you're trying to build those skills. So try to focus on growth as opposed to always focusing on your performance, especially if you are first or second year and you are thinking, hey, maybe I'll apply to X school or Y school afterwards. They tend to weigh your GPA and weigh or put more kind of emphasis on your third and fourth years as opposed to your first and second years.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron and Brandon. With that, we will stop the intake of questions. And thank you, everyone, for stopping by and staying over time to hear Aaron and Brandon share their valuable experience. Before we let you go, we just have one more favor. If you are comfortable turning on your camera right now, we would love to take a picture of this event now that it's on Zoom. So I'll give everyone a few seconds to turn on their cameras if you feel comfortable. For a picture opportunity. This is great. Thank you so much. Okay, 3, 2, 1, cheese.